Chapter 11. Know Your Enemy. If they stayed, relying on sheer numbers, they might just stand a chance against that monster. If they managed to bring it down, the rewards would be massive. The truth is, players are confident because of their numbers. If there were only a few of them here, they'd have bolted without a second thought. Now, seeing that most players had chosen to stay and face the white-eyed monster head-on, those few who were wavering started to reconsider. They didn't want to miss out either. Despite having seen Brother Mang's live stream, which revealed the monster's eerie nature, they believed Steve knew more than they did. The monster's erratic behavior left the players confused, but they remained convinced it was just another creature in the game. Maybe a bug, or some glitch was preventing its form from being visible in the stream. But, since it was a monster, all they had to do was throw themselves at it until it died, right? At this point, almost all the players were gearing up for battle. Only Steve's close friends remained resolute in sticking by him. After all, they had seen the deep pit the white-eyed monster had dug earlier. They understood that even with so many players, they were likely no match for it. Because this creature could think. If it were just a strong foe, perhaps sheer numbers might work. But this monster wasn't only powerful, it was intelligent. It could think, react to the player's actions, and adapt. Under such circumstances, the odds of winning were slim to none. Bro, what now? Should we just leave? Forget about the others? They have no idea what they're up against. Even with so many people, they've got almost no chance. Exactly. And they don't even have decent gear. They'd struggle against regular monsters, let alone him. Seeing his friend's clarity, Steve felt a sense of relief. After a moment of thought, Steve finally made his decision. We're staying. His friends looked at him, puzzled. Why stick around and die with them? Yeah, these people have nothing to do with us. Bro, do you really think they stand a chance against that thing? Steve shook his head at their comments. Of course they're not its match. Right now, we have nothing to tie us down. We could leave any time we want. But in the future, we'll run into it again. Do you think we'll always be able to just drop everything and run? Sooner or later, we'll have to face it. So, we might as well learn more about it now. Steve had his reasons. Since this white-eyed monster had shown up again in this region, it was inevitable they'd cross paths in the future. Right now, without gear or supplies, they could easily flee. But later, when they had guilds, bases, and resources, would they be able to retreat so easily? Better to learn as much as they could while they were still unburdened. At least figure out its abilities, its weaknesses, if any. That way, they wouldn't always be stuck in a reactive position. Hearing Steve's reasoning, his friends thought for a moment and agreed it made sense. Indeed, when faced with challenges and dangers, you can't just run away. Sooner or later, you have to confront them. All right, let's see what it's made of then. I'll go hide the iron ingots and food first. Yeah, bury the chest deep. That thing has an explosion ability. Got it? As Steve's friends started preparing, he began rallying the other players. If you guys really want to fight this thing, we should build high walls around the base, several layers deep. That monster can control other creatures, so at least the walls will slow them down. Steve's plan was clear, adapt to the threat. But he knew that their efforts would have minimal effect. Still, doing something was better than nothing. Seeing Steve change his mind and stay gave the players some confidence. Steve was a top-tier player after all. With him leading the defense, they felt more secure. Under Steve's guidance, the players quickly began working together to fortify their defenses. Meanwhile, on the other side of the plains, Xu Yuan stood over Brother Mang's fading corpse, deep in thought. He had heard everything Mang said to his viewers. From Mang's words, Xu Yuan learned that a large number of players had gathered on the plains. This was great news for Xu Yuan. He had been wondering where to find more players, and now they were coming right to him. With that, Xu Yuan set off towards the plains. Teleporting and moving swiftly, it took him about half an hour to finally reach the players' brightly lit camp. Observing their movements, Xu Yuan quickly realized what they were doing. They're preparing for my arrival? The players were hard at work, constructing a stone wall to encircle their base. Xu Yuan wasn't an idiot. Since Brother Mang had been streaming, he knew his appearance had been broadcast to countless viewers. Still, he didn't expect this group of players to be foolish enough to think they could take him on. But he could understand their mindset. They must have mistaken him for some sort of special monster. Alright then, let's show them just how cruel reality can be. Though his teleport and explosion abilities had cooldowns, dealing with this crowd would still be easy. Xu Yuan had a trump card, his concealment skill. He could hide within stone. All he needed to do was unleash a burst of his abilities, then hide in the stone while his skills cooled down, ready for another strike. The walls the players were building for defense would serve as his perfect cover. Even without the walls, Xu Yuan wasn't concerned. He knew the terrain well. Only 2 or 3 layers of dirt covered the ground before hitting solid stone beneath. With just one explosion, he could burrow into the stone below. So no matter how many players there were, they were no match for Xu Yuan. The busy players, still unaware, were about to turn their fortress into their own tomb. Xu Yuan arrived just as the players had nearly completed their stone walls. The fortress was 20 blocks high with 3 layers of defense. They even had watchtowers. Though the watchtowers were little more than wooden boxes with windows, they'd suffice for now. It was impressive how quickly the players had constructed such a large fortress. There was strength in numbers. Steve had placed players armed with bows and arrows in the watchtowers as lookouts. When they finished, the players looked at the massive fortress they had built together, clearly satisfied. Several players, inspired by Brother Mang, started their own live streams. Preparing for battle with the white-eyed monster. The showdown with the white-eyed monster is about to begin. The walls are ready. We're waiting for the white-eyed monster to show up and get wrecked. The forums were flooded with attention-grabbing stream titles. Players who had seen Brother Mang's earlier stream naturally clicked in. What had happened earlier had caused quite a stir. When viewers saw the massive stone walls and watchtowers, they were astonished. Wow. That's a huge wall. And they have watchtowers. They're serious about this. I counted about 100 people. If they work together, can't they take down one monster? That monster just controls other creatures and explodes, right? With those walls, the other monsters won't get in. Explosions are easy to avoid. Just keep your distance like you do with creepers. This is what they call the 4th calamity. What's so scary about the white-eyed monster? They'll beat him until his eyes roll back. Man, I kind of regret not going over there now. Steve's preparations had boosted the players' morale significantly. Players were known as the 4th calamity in the game, after all. Even though they were currently undergeared, when united, there wasn't much that could stop them. Discussions about the white-eyed monster continued to stir across the internet. Chapter 12. The showdown with the white-eyed monster approaches. As players flooded into the livestream, the excitement spread like wildfire. They rallied behind Steve and his crew, their spirits lifted by the encouraging messages pouring in from the viewers. Players out in the vast plains, watching the stream, were filled with a renewed sense of confidence. Even if they couldn't handle the monster, at least there were witnesses. Others would join them in time. If 100 players couldn't take down the beast, then 1,000 would. And if that failed, they'd bring in 10,000. The game world had no shortage of players. As long as they stuck together, there was no challenge they couldn't overcome. This world belonged to the players, wasn't about to let some monster take over. Brothers, let's do this. This is our shot at fame, one player shouted. Who cares what kind of demon or beast it is? We're the 4th calamity. We'll show it what we're made of, another chimed in. You think you're some big bad monster? Bring it on. We'll knock those white eyes right out of your skull. As the energy of the crowd surged, players on the plains were hyped, hearts pounding as if they were injected with pure adrenaline. The construction of the walls had given them a false sense of security, further boosted by the viewers in the livestream. Confidence swelled, and they started to believe they could do the impossible. But Steve wasn't caught up in their excitement. He knew better. This battle, they were bound to lose. The more fired up the players got now, the harder they'd fall when reality struck. But Steve didn't say anything. He wasn't about to douse their enthusiasm with cold water. Not now. Meanwhile, within the stone walls, Xu Yuan listened closely to the chatter and wild boasts of the players outside. He was itching to humble them, to make them eat their words. But he held back, knowing better. Not worth it killing such a small group, he muttered to himself. Xu Yuan had already counted. There were just over 100 players inside the fortifications. Their kill value wouldn't be high, since they spent their nights holed up in matchbox shelters and only scavenged for scraps during the day. How much kill value could they really have accumulated? Even if he wiped them out, it would barely add up to 3,000 kill points, less than what he could earn from grinding in the monster tower for an hour. This wasn't a profitable venture. I need more of them to come here, Xu Yuan mused. These players were like kindling, easy to extinguish. But if he killed them now, the flame would die out completely. Many of these players were live streaming. If he slaughtered them all, no one would come back to this place. Xu Yuan also had no way to infiltrate the network to find where the most players were gathering. If he killed them here, it might be a long time before he found another cluster of players. The game world was vast, after all. So, for long-term gain, it was best to let this spark grow. If he had to snuff it out, it would be when the blaze was large enough to maximize his profits. Xu Yuan pondered for a moment. If he wanted more players to come, they had to believe they had a chance at defeating him. The players needed to win this battle, but not too easily. It had to be a costly victory, one that would leave them thinking they could win, but only if they had more numbers. If he could stage that kind of performance, more players would definitely come. Looks like I'll need to put on a show. His strategy was clear, but how could he let the players win without making it too obvious? He couldn't just let them hack at him and then pretend to run away. Such bad acting wouldn't fool anyone. He mulled it over, but no good idea came to mind. If throwing the fight won't work, maybe I should give myself a weakness that doesn't exist? Suddenly, Xu Yuan's eyes lit up. Monsters in the game all had their own vulnerabilities. Zombies and skeletons feared sunlight, creepers were afraid of cats, and endermen were weak to water, among other things. So, if the players thought of him as a monster, why couldn't he have a weakness too? With this in mind, Xu Yuan began to recall everything he had seen inside the players' fortifications. His fake weakness had to be something the players already had on hand. But after replaying the scene in his mind, nothing stood out. They had farms, livestock, and piles of matchbox shelters. The building blocks were out. After all, they were just inanimate objects. That left the animals. As the great demon lord, there was no way Xu Yuan could be afraid of pigs, cows, sheep, or chickens. That would be ridiculous, a total blow to his fearsome image. He was about to discard the idea when he suddenly heard 2 wolf howls from inside the walls. An idea struck him like lightning. That's it. Xu Yuan smiled. A monster afraid of wolves, that makes sense, right? In the game, feeding wolves bones could sometimes tame them, after which they would follow players and help fight monsters. Once tamed, they were still wolves but became obedient, responding to the players' commands to sit or stand. Players affectionately called them dogs. Now that Xu Yuan had decided to put on a show, tamed wolves would be the perfect supporting actors. Wolves were fierce animals, and being afraid of them was entirely reasonable. Plus, with the limited resources inside the walls, he didn't have many other options. With his plan set, Xu Yuan was ready to act. Let's bring some monsters over for effect first. Even though Xu Yuan planned to lose this battle, his performance still had to be grand. In Brother Mang's recent livestream, the players had likely guessed Xu Yuan could control monsters. That was why Brother Mang had fled in such a panic. Since this ability was already known, Xu Yuan saw no reason to hide it. A little monster army to set the mood seemed appropriate. Deciding this, Xu Yuan deactivated his stealth, skirted around the players on the watchtower, and started gathering monsters from the surrounding area. Though his control range was limited to 15 by 15, he could collect enough if he moved around. The area was vast, and there were plenty of monsters. Before long, he had a sizable group. Once his forces were assembled, Xu Yuan boldly marched them toward the players' walls. At the same time, atop the wall, a player with the ID when E was chatting casually with the stream viewers. "Brothers, we've been waiting so long, and the monster still hasn't shown up. Maybe it's scared." When E boasted, basking in the attention. Suddenly, the chat exploded with messages. Chapter 13, The Wolves Are Coming. Steve immediately felt something was off after hearing Wen Yi's report. They're coming just like that? Steve wasn't deeply familiar with the white-eyed monster, but after several encounters, he'd formed an impression. The white-eyed monster was cautious. From its reaction after first meeting Steve, to how it avoided alerting other monsters after encountering Brother Mang, everything indicated this. But now, was it seriously approaching so brazenly? Could it be that it didn't anticipate resistance from the players? Steve's thoughts were interrupted by the noisy clamor of the players around him. What now? Do we hold the gate or what? Why aren't we shooting from the watchtower? What are you waiting for? Did it bring creepers? Can we even defend the walls against that? Seeing the players' panicked reactions, Steve frowned. With them like this, they expected to handle the white-eyed monster? A few small minions could throw them into disarray. Sighing, Steve decided not to think too much about it. Regardless, the monster was here. It was time to face it. With that, Steve took command. Wen Yi, report on the monsters below. Hearing Steve's order, Wen Yi glanced over the wall, hastily counted the approaching creatures, and immediately reported. There are about 60 zombies, 20 or so skeleton archers, and 11 creepers. Upon hearing this, Steve began issuing orders. When you and the others on the watchtower shoot downwards. Conserve arrows, they're limited. Target the creepers first. You there, take your team to guard the steps along the wall. Keep high enough so the zombies can't reach you. Shaoli, keep a team on standby to repair the walls. If they get blown up, fix them immediately, and only let one monster in at a time. Those with bows, aim at the gate. If any skeleton archers get through, shoot them down. Steve remained sharp and composed. His command skills were impressive, but he knew this strategy would only hold off the ordinary monsters. There was no way it would trap the white-eyed monster. Still, if they could whittle down the lesser creatures, the white-eyed monster would eventually show itself, giving Steve a chance to study its abilities. Under Steve's leadership, the disorganized group of players quickly pulled together, taking up their assigned positions efficiently. Viewers watching the livestream couldn't help but admire the scene. Steve really knows his stuff. Clear-headed and precise in his commands. Looks like this strategy will stop the flood of monsters. They should be able to take them down quickly. Why don't they just shoot the white-eyed monster from the watchtower? Kill it from a distance, problem solved, right? Yeah, like it's that easy. That monster's got some tricks, it's bound to dodge. True. Steve's plan is the best option right now. Taking out the creepers first prevents them from blowing up the walls. The audience approved of Steve's commands. With such an astute leader at the helm, the players grew more confident. This battle seemed all but won. Following Steve's orders, Wen Yi immediately drew his bow and aimed at one of the creepers in the monster horde. Calculating the trajectory and distance, he pulled back fully, then released the arrow with a sharp twang. The arrow whistled through the air, on course to strike. From this height, as long as Wen Yi's aim was true, he could definitely take down a creeper in one shot. Archery was Wen Yi's forte, and he was proud of his skill. He had no doubt this shot would land. But just as the arrow was about to hit, the white-eyed monster suddenly moved in front of the creeper. Wen Yi's eyes lit up. He's handing himself over on a silver platter. Before his grin could fully form, it turned into a wide O of shock. The arrow struck the white-eyed monster, but it did no damage at all. The moment it made contact, the arrow was deflected. Did I just see that right? He deflected it. Wen Yi stood frozen, unable to believe what he had just seen. The audience in the livestream saw it too. Though they couldn't make out the monster's features, they clearly saw the arrow being knocked aside. For a brief moment, the entire chat froze in shock, before exploding. What the hell? Deflected it? Immune to arrows? That's insane. What? Is he wearing some kind of magic armor or what? Holy crap. How many skills does this monster have? I'm less surprised by the deflected arrow. What's freaking me out is that he's protecting the creepers from the arrows. Yeah? That means he's thinking tactically. He knows how crucial the creepers are to this battle. This fight might be tougher than we thought. While the arrow deflection was shocking, it wasn't entirely unexpected. The white-eyed monster was practically a boss-tier creature. It having multiple skills, including arrow immunity, wasn't surprising. What truly alarmed the players was its tactical awareness. The fact that it was actively shielding the creepers from harm demonstrated intelligence far beyond that of an ordinary monster. If it were just a regular creature, it wouldn't have bothered. This action confirmed what Steve had suspected. It could think. It knew how important the creepers were in this battle, so it had made protecting them a priority. Moments earlier, the players had felt optimistic, buoyed by the strong defenses and Steve's leadership. But now doubts crept in. The white-eyed monster's abilities seemed bottomless, and no one knew how many tricks it still had up its sleeve. Combined with its tactical mind, this battle was shaping up to be brutal. As the viewers continued to discuss, when he finally snapped out of his daze, he yelled down into the fortress, "We can't kill the creepers. The monster is shielding them, and it can reflect arrows." The players inside the walls gasped. It can deflect arrows? If we don't kill the creepers, they're going to blow a hole in the wall. Damn, this monster is OP. Steve wasn't particularly surprised by the news. All of this was within his expectations. The white-eyed monster had intelligence, and of course, it would understand the importance of the creepers. After a brief moment of thought, Steve issued new orders. Those in the watchtower, fire in sync. Even if it can block, it can only shield one creeper at a time. If you can't kill the creepers, kill whatever you can. There were 3 skilled archers in the watchtower. Hearing Steve's command, they immediately coordinated their shots. 3 arrows flew simultaneously, targeting a zombie, a creeper, and a skeleton. As expected, the white-eyed monster only managed to block the arrow aimed at the creeper. The zombie and skeleton were instantly killed by the remaining arrows. The archers cheered. It worked. Want to keep blocking? Let's see you split in 2. Keep at it. Aim for the creepers. With Steve's strategy proving effective, the players were thrilled. They launched another round of attacks. In the next volley, 2 creepers were eliminated. Just as the archers prepared to fire again, they realized that the monsters had already reached the base of the walls. The horde had entered the watchtower's blind spot. Chapter 14. Does this monster know tactics? It's coming. Holy crap, here it comes. That white-eyed monster is back. Damn, and it's brought a whole horde with it. Look at that entourage. It's marching straight at us? It really doesn't care about us at all, does it? Seeing the barrage of comments, when E finally glanced beyond the wall. Outside, a massive horde of monsters surged forward, with the white-eyed creature leading the charge. Even though when E was safe atop the watchtower, the sight still made him shiver. He hurriedly turned to shout to the others behind him. It's here. It's coming. And there's a whole army with it. The players within the walls froze. Despite all their bravado, hearing the news sent a wave of tension through them. The scene within the walls was almost comical. Just moments ago, they had been bragging about cutting off the monster's head and displaying it as a trophy. Now, with the real threat approaching, they scrambled like headless chickens. After all, they were a loose group of individuals with no real organization or discipline. Faced with an actual crisis, they had no idea what to do. The players stationed at the watchtowers could no longer target the monsters below. When E quickly reported the situation, "They're at the foot of the wall. We can't hit them anymore." Hearing this, the players inside the wall nervously gulped. The monsters had reached the outer perimeter of the wall and would soon attempt to breach it. The real battle was about to begin. Steve, sweating nervously, tightened his grip. He knew he was about to face that white-eyed monster again, and to say he wasn't anxious would be a lie. Although there were no concerns about equipment or resources this time, the uncertainty surrounding the monster still unsettled him. Taking a deep breath to steady himself, Steve snapped into action. "Everyone, hold your positions. Don't panic. Those repairing the walls, stay sharp. Be quick. Remember, we can respawn infinitely, but these monsters only have 1 life. Steve understood the battle was likely unwinnable, but with the conflict imminent, a little morale boost was essential. Upon hearing his words, the players visibly relaxed. Yeah. We can respawn, what are we afraid of? We can afford countless mistakes, but that thing can only mess up once. Brothers, don't fear the white-eyed freak. Just charge. Inside the walls, players cheered each other on, their spirits high. They readied themselves, eyes glued to the wall before them. Minutes ticked by, but nothing stirred outside the wall. Some players started to grow uneasy. What's going on? Why is there no movement? Did they run away? That's not right. What's the update from your side? The players muttered amongst themselves when suddenly, loud booms echoed from outside the wall. In an instant, 4 different sections of the wall exploded simultaneously. Before the players inside could react, monsters began pouring through the breaches. Everyone was caught off guard. 4 breaches? We're surrounded. Damn it. Where are the repair teams? Patch those holes, quick. The players had assumed the monsters would only attack one section of the wall. No one had expected the white-eyed monster to break the rules. Blasting through 4 spots at once completely threw them off guard. The viewers watching the live stream were equally shocked. We're done. They won't be able to repair the walls in time. That monster knows tactics? This is absurd. We underestimated it. That white-eyed creature is playing on a whole different level. The sudden turn of events threw the players inside the wall into disarray. Chaos erupted as they scrambled to respond. The repair teams never anticipated the monsters would blow open 4 breaches at once, leaving them no time to patch up the holes. More and more monsters streamed in. Steve's face darkened, his fists clenched tightly. As expected, this isn't going to be easy. He, too, had fallen into the trap of complacency. He hadn't accounted for the white-eyed monster launching simultaneous attacks on multiple fronts. It was clear now that he had underestimated the creature's capabilities. Its thinking and strategy were far superior to his own. But there was one thing Steve couldn't figure out. If the white-eyed monster was smart enough to breach 4 places simultaneously, why not attack from all 4 directions? Had it done so, the players would have been completely surrounded, making victory even easier. Maybe it didn't think of that? It was similar to how Steve hadn't realized until now that the other 3 walls were undefended. Oversights were inevitable when working under time pressure. Pushing these thoughts aside, Steve refocused on the task at hand. Stay calm, everyone. Stick to your roles. Players on the platforms, don't worry. The zombies can't reach you. Archers, prioritize the crawlers and skeletons. Repair teams, get moving. Although the monsters had breached 4 areas, they were still concentrated in one general direction. A slight adjustment to their strategy would suffice. The scattered players weren't novices. They just lacked coordination under pressure. With Steve's commands, they quickly pulled themselves together. Under Steve's leadership, the players swiftly reorganized and engaged the invading monsters. After 10 minutes of fierce fighting, the players emerged victorious. The ground inside the wall was littered with monster corpses and scattered loot. This wave of monsters consisted mostly of zombies, with only about 20 of the white-eyed creatures. Most of the creepers had already expended themselves blowing up the wall, leaving only a few to breach it. To the players, the creepers posed the greatest threat. Whenever one appeared inside the walls, Steve would immediately direct the players to eliminate it. The white-eyed creatures were handled similarly. Once spotted, they were taken out quickly. With the more dangerous monsters dealt with, only the slow-moving zombies remained. From the safety of platforms more than 2 blocks high, the players could easily slaughter the zombies with no risk of being hit. Though a few players had died in the skirmish, only around 10, which was an impressive result. As they looked at the heaps of monster corpses and loot, the players swelled with pride. Great! We wiped out all these low-level mobs. We barely lost anyone. We came out ahead in this fight. With over 90 of us left, there's no way we'll lose to one monster. Let's keep this momentum going and take down the white-eyed freak. Given that this was early in the game, players were still learning the basics. While they could barely hold their own against small groups of monsters, facing larger swarms still meant running for their lives. They hadn't yet discovered advanced strategies to handle these creatures. So, after successfully killing so many, it was no wonder they were feeling smug. In the live stream chat, viewers celebrated the victory. That was awesome. They cleared out the small fries. Not many deaths, either. There's definitely a chance. More than a chance. It's 90 against 1. The odds are in our favor. Plus, Steve's leading the charge. This is as close to a sure win as you can get. But Steve, seeing the players' complacency, sighed deeply. Go ahead and laugh, you won't be smiling for long. He knew these monsters were just appetizers. The real threat hadn't revealed itself yet. Once it did, no one would be laughing anymore. Despite knowing this battle was unwinnable, Steve hadn't forgotten his objective. The reason he stayed here was to learn more about the white-eyed monster. With that in mind, Steve continued to issue orders. Stop grouping up. Spread out. This monster has explosive skills. Keep an eye on all directions and archers, switch weapons. Bows are useless against him. Don't be afraid. If you see him, get in close and attack. Steve didn't expect the players to actually defeat the white-eyed monster, but with so many of them, they could at least force it to reveal some of its abilities. The more they learned, the better their chances of eventually overcoming it. Chapter 1590 vs. 1. After their recent victory, the players were more confident in Steve's leadership and immediately followed his instructions. Soon, they had spread out into teams of 2 or 3, positioned throughout the interior of the walls. Each team kept a safe distance from the others. Even if one group of players was blown up, it wouldn't affect the rest. Just after the teams had finished their setup, a sudden scream pierced the air. Ah! The scream had barely died down when it was followed by a thunderous explosion. The players immediately turned toward the sound of the blast. By then, there was nothing left but 2 corpses and a deep crater in the ground where the explosion had occurred. What just happened? Is it him? Is he here? Everything had happened so fast that no one really knew what was going on. After a brief silence, a nearby group of players, who had been closest to the explosion, finally spoke up, trembling as they did. It's him. He's here. I saw him. I don't even know where he came from. He just appeared out of nowhere. And then, right after the explosion, he vanished again. This group of players, having been the closest, had caught a glimpse of everything. They had seen the monster appear, explode, and disappear in less than 2 seconds. Their brains hadn't even fully registered what had happened before the monster was already gone. The scene had an overwhelming impact on the nearby group of players. Coincidentally, one of them had been live streaming the whole thing. The players watching the stream were equally shocked. What was that just now? What kind of skill is that? Teleportation? Invisibility? Damn, with power like that, even if we had 900 players, it would just be a massacre. Game designers, come out here. You really designed this monster? The players' brief victory against those low-level minions had inflated their confidence quite a bit. Some of them even began to feel that maybe, just maybe, they could stand a chance against the white-eyed monster. But as soon as that monster appeared, 2 players were gone in an instant. It had happened so fast that no one even saw how it was done. In less than a second, 2 lives were snuffed out. And this was while the players were spread out. If they had been clustered together, the remaining 90-something players wouldn't have lasted even a minute. Most of them wouldn't have even known what hit them. In that moment, the players realized just how arrogant they had been. Facing such a powerful and cunning creature, sheer numbers meant nothing. All having a large group would do was delay their inevitable annihilation. After this sudden attack, panic quickly spread among the players. The monster was in the shadows, while they were out in the open. Even though they all knew deep down it was just a game, there was no denying the fear. Anyone in their situation would feel terrified. Damn it! Where's he hiding? What kind of skill is that? Invisibility? White-eyed monster. If you've got guts, come out and fight us head-on. Stop sneaking around like a coward. Steve, hearing the players' accounts, furrowed his brows. The white-eyed monster's power seemed unfathomable. In just that one brief encounter, the creature had used at least 2 different abilities. Steve wasn't sure where the monster had gone, but he suspected it was using some kind of stealth ability. Thinking this over, he quickly issued a command to the players. It seems like he's using some kind of invisibility skill. Everyone, swing your weapons in front of you. If the white-eyed monster was really using stealth, it would have to get close to the players before attacking. Maybe if they swung their weapons randomly, they'd have a chance to hit it. Upon hearing Steve's command, the players immediately began swinging their weapons through the air. They thought this strategy might actually work. But less than half a minute later, another scream rang out, followed by yet another explosion. Another team of players had been wiped out. This time, the players nearby hadn't even seen the monster. It was like a ghost, appearing and disappearing without a trace. Damn it! How does he keep showing up like that? I've been swinging my arm until it's sore, and it's useless. Could he be immune to sword damage? That's just absurd. The death of that team only confirmed that Steve's strategy was worthless. Even if the players swung until their arms fell off, it wouldn't make any difference. The ones marked for death would still die. A sense of dread began to spread within the city walls. The players' confidence was now at an all-time low. They were finally starting to grasp just how enormous the gap between them and the monster truly was. Forget hurting it, they didn't even have the right to catch a glimpse of it. Realizing this, the players' morale began to collapse. Many of them were already thinking of giving up. At this point, all eyes were on Steve. After all, Steve was the leader of this battle. The players had been able to defeat the low-level minions only because they had followed his orders. If even Steve couldn't turn the tide, then there was no hope for them. Seeing the looks they gave him, Steve could only sigh in frustration. In truth, this battle had never been winnable. The fact that the players had even managed to defeat those low-tier monsters was already an achievement. Even though he had known this outcome was inevitable, Steve still felt a deep sense of defeat. He had never anticipated that the situation would turn so dire once the white-eyed monster appeared. Forget fighting back. The players who had died hadn't even known what hit them or what the enemy looked like. The difference in strength was just too overwhelming to overcome with numbers alone. As Steve was deep in thought, another loud explosion echoed across the battlefield. Another team had been wiped out. This explosion was like a death knell for the remaining players, shattering whatever confidence they had left. Shit! If you're gonna kill us, do it already. Stop dragging this out. Damn it. I can't take it anymore. I'm digging a hole to hide in. What good will that do? You'll still get blown up? Then I'll dig deeper. Maybe if I stack enough layers, I'll survive. By this point, most of the players had given up resisting. Some just wanted to die quickly, while others were trying desperate measures to survive. Meanwhile, the players watching the live stream were equally suffocated by the tension, even though they weren't physically there. Damn it! Why is the monster so strong, but it's still taking its sweet time killing them? Can't it just get it over with? Some predators toy with their prey before finishing them off, get it? This is pure despair. They can't even die quickly. He definitely has a mind of his own. Otherwise, why would he be tormenting them like this? Monster's got a twisted sense of humor. Does it really enjoy watching people squirm in fear like this? Steve felt utterly powerless at this point. It was clear that the players could no longer provoke the white-eyed monster into revealing more of its abilities. The players weren't capable of threatening it in any way. And judging by the way it was killing them off at intervals, it almost seemed like the creature was toying with them. That was what stung the most. Steve had already resigned himself to his fate. Just then, a series of wolf howls echoed across the battlefield. The sudden sound startled the players, making them jump. Looking toward the source, they saw that it was coming from a wolf owned by a player named Li Wei. The wolf was sniffing at a pile of rocks and barking furiously. "Ergu, what are you barking at? You scared the hell out of me. Sit down now." Li Wei tugged at the wolf's collar, trying to get it to sit. But no matter what commands Li Wei gave, Ergu wouldn't obey. In the original Minecraft, wolves could be tamed and would follow players' commands to sit or stand, even attacking targets alongside them. In this game, the wolves had been tweaked a bit. They now had a monster detection ability. If a monster got within 5 blocks of a player, the wolf would alert them. This small change had made the game's mechanics more logical. Chapter 16, I finally found you. Li Wei continued to command Ergu to sit. At that moment, however, Steve's face lit up with a glimmer of hope. Finally found you. Li Wei didn't understand what was happening and thought Ergu was barking randomly. But Steve, with his sharp gaming instincts, knew better. Ergu wasn't barking for no reason. Seeing this, Steve quickly signaled to the other players who also had wolves. Get your wolves to where Ergu is? Hearing this, the players immediately complied. Sure enough, just as Steve expected, when the other wolves gathered, they all began barking at the pile of rocks, just like Ergu. At this point, one of the players finally realized what was happening. That monster, could it be hiding inside the rocks? I remember that tamed wolves can detect monsters within 5 blocks. It has to be in there. Wait, so it's been hiding inside the rocks the whole time? Damn, is this a monster or some kind of monkey? The continuous howling of the wolves now sounded like the melody of hope to the players. Even though they knew the power gap between them and the white-eyed monster was immense, at least they had found it. That was a breakthrough. It was better than waiting around for death. Although they had pretty much figured out that the white-eyed monster was hiding in the rocks, no one dared to act recklessly. None of the players wanted to get too close to the pile of rocks. Instead, they all kept their distance and began to discuss strategies. Now that we know where it is, what do we do next? How do we take it down? Can we even take it down? It has an explosion skill. We can't get close. And arrows don't seem to hurt it either. This is tough. How about a Zerg rush? We could all just surround the spot and wait. As soon as it comes out, we charge before it can hide again. What's the point? By the time we get there, it'll already be hiding again. After a long discussion, the players were still at a loss for how to deal with the white-eyed monster. They had no strategy because they knew too little about the monster's abilities. No one knew what else it had in store. Inside the pile of rocks, surrounded by the howling wolves, Xu Yuan could hear everything clearly from his hiding spot. He was a bit surprised. He hadn't expected that in this game, tamed wolves had this ability to locate him. However, this unexpected turn of events was actually a blessing in disguise for him. Xu Yuan had been trying to figure out a believable way to continue his act. Now, these wolf pups were adding to his performance for him. Seizing the opportunity, Xu Yuan decided to go along with it. With that thought, he revealed himself, standing atop the pile of rocks. The wolves around the pile, seeing Xu Yuan appear, howled even more furiously, intensifying their performance. The players, who had been arguing about strategies, immediately turned their attention to the pile of rocks when they heard the increasing howls. Finally, they saw the white-eyed monster for the first time. It had the same face as Steve, but its demeanor was worlds apart. The creature radiated a vicious aura. Just standing there, it exuded an overwhelming sense of pressure. And with those eyes glowing white, it made their skin crawl. The players, upon seeing the monster, froze. No one dared to move. He's out? What do we do now? Damn it. It's just a monster. Let's get him. You go first then. And why are your legs shaking? The players stared at each other, none of them daring to take the first step forward. Before seeing the monster, they had all been talking big. But now, faced with it, they were paralyzed with fear. They didn't even know why they were so scared. After all, it was just a game. But there was something about the monster that instilled genuine terror. It wasn't the fear of death. Everyone knew they would die eventually. It was something else, an oppressive feeling that made them lose their rationality, as if they couldn't breathe. Inside the city walls, no one moved. The silence was deafening, broken only by the howling wolves. Xu Yuan, seeing this, felt a little puzzled. Hadn't they just been discussing how to deal with him? Now that he'd appeared, they didn't react at all. He sighed to himself. Looks like I'll have to play along with the wolves. At this moment, with all the players' attention on him, Xu Yuan switched to full-on performance mode. He cast a glance at the wolves around him, furrowing his brows and showing an expression of extreme disgust. His acting was so convincing that the players, who had been watching him intently, quickly picked up on it. Wait, did I see that right? Does he look scared? You think so too? Could it be? Is he afraid of wolves? Holy crap! He's really afraid of wolves. The players, upon noticing the white-eyed monster's reaction, grew excited. The owners of the wolves immediately gave commands to their pets. Ergu, attack him. Bite him. 15 bones. Show him what you've got. Xiaobai, go get him. At their master's commands, the wolves charged toward Xu Yuan. Seeing that the players had fallen for his act, Xu Yuan ramped up his performance. As the wolves rushed him, Xu Yuan used his teleportation ability to distance himself. Not far away was the hole in the city wall from the previous explosion. He teleported to the edge and, without looking back, made his exit. The wolves chased him for a short distance before teleporting back to their masters. Even after Xu Yuan had been gone for a while, the players were still standing there, stunned. Finally, one player cautiously approached the spot where Xu Yuan had left and peeked outside. Seeing nothing, he was completely bewildered. Did he run away? The moment those words left his mouth, the entire city wall erupted in chaos. Holy crap! Did we just win? No way! That terrifying white-eyed monster, after all that, was scared of wolves. A few wolves scared him off? We did all that planning for nothing? What kind of plot twist is this? I'm totally confused. That victory came out of nowhere. If he's really afraid of wolves, we should just bring more next time. Then we'll definitely take him down. The players' reactions were proof that Xu Yuan's performance was quite convincing. At the very least, the audience was pleased, and there were plenty of good reviews going around. As the players inside the city cheered and celebrated, only Steve and his close friends wore troubled expressions. This doesn't make sense. Something's off. This is too strange. Chapter 17. Something's wrong. This is too strange. Something is too strange. Steve and his friends knew much more about the white-eyed monster than the other players, which is why they were the only ones sensing that something was wrong. Seeing his friends' puzzled expressions, Steve asked, "You all feel like something's off too?" The group nodded. It's normal for monsters in the game to have weaknesses, but for a creature like that, even if it had a weakness, it wouldn't show it so easily. Exactly. Even if he's afraid of wolves, with his strength, he could easily kill them. Why would he need to run away? Also, did you notice? When he attacked the city wall, he blew it up from 4 different sides. If he knew to target all 4 walls, why didn't he attack from all 4 sides at once? Wouldn't that have been much easier? Hearing this, Steve nodded in agreement. Yes, I noticed that too. It was a mistake on my part not to defend all 4 sides earlier. I thought he might have overlooked it as well. But now, it feels like there's more to this. Early on, when the white-eyed monster attacked the city, Steve had already sensed something was off. At first, he assumed it was a mistake on the monster's part. But after seeing how the creature fled upon encountering the wolves, Steve began to doubt his earlier assumption. It likely wasn't a mistake at all. It might have been intentional. And if that white-eyed monster truly wanted to win, the best strategy would have been to attack alongside the other monsters. With the creatures providing cover, the players would be overwhelmed, scattered, and unable to trace his movements. That would have made it much easier to annihilate the players. But instead, the monster let the other creatures in first, waiting until the players had defeated them before making his own move. Such a course of action defied logic. Steve pondered this and became even more perplexed. With his strength, he could have wiped us out effortlessly. So why did he go to such lengths and deliberately lose? His friends shook their heads, equally baffled. Doesn't make any sense. Maybe he wanted to inflate our egos before crushing us? But why bother? We're no threat to him. Why would he go through all this trouble? No matter how long they speculated, Steve and his friends couldn't figure out the white-eyed monster's intentions. One thing they did realize, though, they hadn't truly won this battle. If victory was claimed, it was because the monster had let them win. At no point had they held the upper hand. The monster had been in control the entire time. He decided the players would win, and only because he allowed it. But what? Steve still had no clue. The only option was to wait and see what the monster would do next. If the creature had indeed planned this from the start, he'd likely make another move soon. With that in mind, Steve shared his thoughts with his friends. Then he asked them, "I plan to stick around and see what happens. Why don't you guys go develop somewhere else?" Steve knew full well that escaping now was the safest option. Regardless of the monster's motives, the players were bound to lose in the end. Their fate was already sealed in his hands. Leaving would allow them to avoid being stunted by whatever the creature had planned. Yet Steve didn't want to leave. He understood that even if they escaped for now, they'd inevitably face the white-eyed monster again, as long as he existed in this game world. Better to confront the problem now, when they had nothing to lose, and find a way to deal with him. Steve's suggestion was out of concern for his friends' growth, and he wouldn't ask them to stay and face the danger with him. His friends, however, shook their heads. "We started this together, and you think we're going to split up now? Come on, Steve. You know my curiosity. If I don't figure out what this monster's up to, I won't be able to focus on anything else. We can develop here too. Worst case, we bury our resources underground. It's no big deal." Seeing his friend's loyalty, Steve was moved. "All right then. We'll stay here and see what game he's playing." Within the city walls, Steve and his friends were probably the only ones still thinking clearly. The other players were all caught up in the euphoria of victory. "White-eyed monster, my ass." A few wolves scared him off. "If he dares to come back, we'll have the wolves gnaw his bones to dust. Now we've got a goal. Kill the white-eyed freak and train the wolves. Do you think he'll be too scared to return? Wouldn't that be a waste of our effort? If he doesn't come back, we'll take the wolves to him. I'm getting those supplies off him, no matter what." The live stream viewers were equally excited. "Holy crap, I didn't expect such a strong monster to be afraid of wolves. Something feels off about this. Wolves aren't particularly aggressive. They're neutral monsters, right? Cats aren't aggressive either, but creepers still run away from them. Monsters having natural enemies isn't unusual. And here I thought this monster was something special. Turns out he's just this? Alright folks, I'm heading over to join Steve's camp. I'll start the trek once it's daylight. Killing that monster should yield some pretty good loot." In the live stream, a few players voiced concerns that something wasn't right. But their opinions were quickly drowned out. Most players only trusted what they saw with their own eyes. After all, none of them had actually faced the white-eyed monster. They only knew of him through the live stream or word of mouth. Sure, a lot of people talked about how powerful this monster was, but the players didn't really believe it. Or rather, they didn't want to believe it. Seeing the monster flee from the wolves had even stirred some sympathy. Now that they had discovered his weakness, it was only a matter of time before they killed him. Although the white-eyed monster had a weakness, his overall strength was formidable. The loot from killing him would likely be valuable. And people had heard he was intelligent. His lair might contain even better treasures. Before long, a wave of player suicide swept the game, as players sought to respawn at coordinates close to Steve's camp. One by one, they headed there. The players at Steve's camp were thrilled to see so many players from the live stream wanting to join them. The more the better. Come on over, everyone. Let's grow stronger together and take down the white-eyed monster. With so many people joining, we'll have to expand the walls again. Just so we're clear, when we fight the white-eyed monster, it's every man for himself. No stealing supplies. None of the players realized that their words weren't just falling on friendly ears. Hidden within a stone inside the city wall, Xu Yuan heard every word. He hadn't actually left after escaping the city. Instead, he had concealed himself within the walls to observe the players' reactions. From what he could hear, things were going well. More players were on their way to the camp. Looks like the pieces are falling into place. Chapter 18. Professional Footwork Trainer. Xu Yuan's acting had been pretty shoddy just now. In a normal situation, with his explosive abilities, even if he feared the wolves, his first instinct would have been to kill them. Running away at the sight of them? That was completely out of character. But most players only trusted what they saw with their own eyes. Even if there were inconsistencies, they would rationalize them away. Seeing that the players had bought into his performance, Xu Yuan breathed a sigh of relief. Although setting all this up was tedious, it was necessary. The game world was vast, and the players were scattered. That made it harder for Xu Yuan to accumulate kill points. While he had built a mob farm, it could only generate 5,000 kill points per hour. But Xu Yuan needed a lot of kill points to upgrade his skills and unlock mods. These two were the primary ways to increase his power. Intimidation was only useful for controlling monsters. It wasn't particularly helpful otherwise. The mob farm alone was barely enough to meet his early-stage needs. As he progressed, the kill points required for upgrades would only increase. To gather enough kill points, he'd have to extract them from the players. As the game advanced, players would be killing more and more monsters. One player could be worth more than 5,000 kill points. Xu Yuan's current goal was to fatten up these players, attract even more to the area, and then harvest them when the time was right. He pondered for a moment. They don't seem to know how to farm monsters yet. If he wanted to fatten them up, he'd have to teach them how to farm efficiently. Xu Yuan observed that the players on the plains didn't venture out at night. That meant they likely hadn't learned the art of footwork or how to build a mob farm. Looks like I'll have to teach them how to do it. If the players wanted to farm kill points quickly, building mob farms was the best method. But sharing that knowledge would accelerate their progress. And player kill points affected the pace at which mods were unlocked. Telling them how to build a mob farm would inevitably speed up the mod unlocks. Without enough strength, the players unlocking mods could pose a threat to Xu Yuan. So, for now, he wouldn't reveal that method. Instead, he'd teach them footwork techniques. It's like the enchanted item, the shield staff from the Twilight Forest. When used, 5 shields float around the player, each able to absorb 1 instance of regular damage. Regular damage includes explosive attacks. If players get their hands on that item, and Xu Yuan only has his explosive skill for offense, then he'd be completely ineffective against them. That would put Xu Yuan in a passive and vulnerable position. So, the best strategy right now to fatten up the players is to teach them the foot-cutting method. This way, the players' kill counts won't rise too fast, but they also won't stagnate. As more players gather here, the kill value Xu Yuan gains from them would be more than enough. Of course, the ideal outcome would be for the players to develop a dependency on this area. Even if they get killed by Xu Yuan once, they'd continue living here. That would be perfect. However, this isn't something Xu Yuan can control. Whether the players stay or leave is entirely up to them. With that thought in mind, Xu Yuan decided to implement his plan. First, he would teach the players the foot-cutting method. At this moment, the sky was just starting to brighten. Xu Yuan left the stone on the city wall and teleported away from the players' encampment. After searching the surroundings for a while, he found a cave a few meters deep, with signs of human activity, likely where players had previously gathered stones. This place isn't bad, Xu Yuan mused. The cave had no natural light, and even during the day, monsters could spawn here. Additionally, since players had come here before to gather materials, it was bound to be visited again, especially with the large number of players heading this way. They'd soon need to expand the walls, meaning they'd definitely return to this spot. So, building the foot-cutting shelter here was sure to attract their attention. Having found the right location, Xu Yuan immediately began constructing the shelter. Building it was straightforward, like assembling a matchbox. The only real difference was replacing the stones near the ground with half-bricks. Sure, he could just dig out the stones near the ground, but that wouldn't protect against spiders and baby zombies. After all, spiders and baby zombies are only 1 block tall. By using half-bricks, Xu Yuan could prevent all kinds of monsters from getting in. With a few quick movements, Xu Yuan had the foot-cutting shelter built. He also dug a tunnel inside the shelter. The tunnel wasn't of much use to Xu Yuan, but it would be valuable to the players later on. After that, he controlled some isolated monsters in the cave and made them gather around the shelter. Once everything was in place, Xu Yuan concealed himself within the surrounding stones, waiting for the players to arrive. About half an hour later, he heard voices approaching from a distance. "How many people do you think will show up?" How many stones are we supposed to mine, anyway? I'd say at least 1,000, maybe more. Those far away probably can't teleport to this location just yet, so they'll have to take a few detours. 1,000? You kidding me? My stream alone has over 10,000 people watching, and most of them are already gearing up to head over. That's great. We could start a guild and eventually become the #1 guild around here. Well, that depends on what kind of resources we get from killing that white-eyed monster. Let's hurry. We've got a lot to do. The group of players chattered as they reached the cave entrance. The player leading them had the ID Xiaope. After taking a look inside, he stumbled back, startled. The scene inside the cave was strange. Several zombies and skeletons surrounded a box-shaped structure, as if something inside was drawing them in. Xiaope and his group had gotten close enough to trigger the monster's aggro range, but the creatures didn't turn around to attack. Seeing this, the players quickly retreated a few steps. Chapter 19: The Monster Farm Secret. What's going on in there? We should have triggered their aggro by now. Why aren't they attacking? Could it be that the white-eyed monster is controlling them again? Although they had recently won a fight against the white-eyed monster, the players still feared it. They even brought a wolf pup along as an early warning system. They had the pup sniff around the area, and when it indicated that the surrounding rocks were safe, the group relaxed. What now? Do we check it out? Is there someone inside that matchbox? How about you shout and see if anyone responds? As they debated, Xiaopo's sharp eyes noticed a trapdoor on the ground not far away. He hurried over, opened the trapdoor, and found a long tunnel below. There's a passage here. The tunnel stretched far into the distance, with no end in sight. Fortunately, torches were spaced every few meters, lighting the entire passage. This helped Xiaope and the others let down their guard. Could this tunnel lead to that matchbox thing? Now that you mention it, that's a real possibility. Why else would there be a random trapdoor here? This must have been made by someone. No way that white-eyed monster could build trapdoors. Should we go down and check it out? After a brief discussion, Xiaope and his group decided to explore the tunnel. They hadn't gone far when the path ahead ended, and they found themselves in a 2x2 tunnel dug into the ceiling above. There was a ladder on the side of the passage leading up to another trapdoor. It seemed like they had reached the end of the tunnel. Without hesitation, the group climbed the ladder and pushed open the trapdoor. When they emerged into the space above, their earlier guess was confirmed. This really is the matchbox. Standing inside the matchbox structure, Xiaope and the others finally got a good look. The part of the structure near the ground wasn't made of stone. It had been replaced with half-bricks. They could see the monster's feet, but even though the creatures sensed them, they couldn't attack. The group was ecstatic at the sight. Holy crap! This works! We found a way to kill monsters without taking any damage. This is amazing! I wonder which genius built this. The original owner must have left in a hurry and forgot to tear it down. Xiaopo's group wasn't stupid. They quickly figured out the purpose of the foot-cutting shelter. Grinning, they eagerly took up their weapons and started slashing at the monster's legs. After clearing out the creatures around the shelter without taking any damage, they were ecstatic. This is insane. Building one of these is perfect for passing time at night. Damn. If we'd known about this sooner, we could have used this trick to kill those monsters during the siege without getting hurt. Right? With this method, even if that white-eyed monster comes with an army, we won't have to worry. The game had only recently launched, and while players weren't too afraid of the monsters anymore, they hadn't yet discovered a foolproof method to fight them without taking damage. At best, they knew how to deal with zombies by building upwards. But when it came to skeletons and creepers, they were clueless. That's why they were forced to hide in safe spots at night. Xiaopo's group was no different. But after experiencing the thrill of farming monsters without taking damage, they were hooked. With this new method, they wouldn't need to hide at night anymore. This would accelerate their growth considerably. Let's head back and spread the news. Forget mining stones for now. Should we stream this? If we stream it, it'll blow up for sure. Nah, let's keep this to ourselves for now. Xiaope, why don't you start a guild? With this strategy, you'd be the perfect guild leader. Xiao Po's group didn't plan to keep this secret for long. After all, it was bound to get out eventually. Now that they had a foolproof method to farm monsters, they'd be out and about at night, and sooner or later, others would catch on. Better to use the method to win some favor with others. Though there were plenty of players on the plains, no one had yet taken the lead. At present, Steve is the most likely candidate to be chosen. However, now that this strategy has come to light, nothing is certain. Xiao Po's crew also harbors ambitions. After all, who wouldn't want to be the leader? With this realization, they hurried back to their base. Before leaving, they didn't forget to dismantle the foot massage tent, making sure no one else could find it. After Xiao Po's crew left, Xu Yuan finally emerged from his hiding spot behind the rocks. He had to admit, he was quite pleased with how Xiao Po's team reacted. Earlier, Xu Yuan had been worried that Xiao Po's crew might keep the foot massage tent a secret, refusing to share the strategy with others. If that had happened, Xu Yuan would have had to come up with another plan. Fortunately, Xiao Po crew seemed cooperative and had no intention of keeping the strategy to themselves. As long as they spread the word, Xu Yuan's plan was as good as solid. Now, all he had to do was sit back and let the players develop on their own. Chapter 20. Ding. The taming system is now online. With this major task out of the way, Xu Yuan finally felt a sense of relief. He opened up the system, intending to check on the output of the monster tower. But as he did, he noticed a flood of new notifications on the information panel. Zombie number 1120 has killed player 1. Taming system activated. Zombie number 1120 taming progress, 1 out of 10. Complete taming progress to evolve basic consciousness. Zombie number 1120 has died. Taming progress reset to 0. Zombie number 3003 has killed player 1. Zombie number 3003 taming progress, 1/10. Zombie number 3003 has died. Taming progress reset to 0. Previously, every system notification would pop up on a virtual screen. With the monster tower constantly at work, Xu Yuan was bombarded with messages. Finding it annoying, he had turned off the notifications. Thankfully, the system saved important information, so Xu Yuan hadn't missed this critical update. Upon seeing the new notifications, Xu Yuan couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement. The taming system? You mean monsters can be tamed? Although Xu Yuan could already control monsters through his intimidation, taming was something entirely different. Controlling a monster only allowed him to direct its movements. The monsters themselves had no thoughts or consciousness, they simply acted on his will. But taming? That was another story. According to the system, taming could grant monsters their own consciousness. In other words, they would have their own thought processes. That would mean Xu Yuan wouldn't have to micromanage them anymore. He could simply give them orders, and they'd carry them out on their own. Excited by the possibilities, Xu Yuan immediately opened the taming system. The moment it loaded, he was dazzled by the complexity. The taming panel was divided into 4 major sections. Nearby monster information, controllable monster information, taming progress, consciousness evolution. The first 2 sections, nearby monster information and controllable monster information, were straightforward. They displayed various monster details, with each monster assigned a unique ID number by the system. For instance, the notifications earlier had mentioned zombie number 1120 and zombie number 3003. The taming progress section was currently empty, given that both zombie number 1120 and zombie number 3003 had met their untimely ends. When Xu Yuan opened the 4th section, a detailed explanation popped up. Consciousness evolution. Complete taming progress to initiate consciousness evolution. Kill 10 players to grant basic consciousness. Kill 1,000 players to grant intermediate consciousness. Kill 10,000 players to grant advanced consciousness. Kill 1 million players to grant autonomous consciousness. Basic consciousness. The monster will gain basic awareness and shed parts of its original game mechanics. Note: upon gaining basic consciousness, the monster will accumulate taming progress through each kill, 1 point per kill. Intermediate consciousness. The monster will gain independent thought and the ability to control other unconscious monsters within range. The advanced consciousness. The monster's strength will increase, gaining commanding abilities and a larger control radius. It can command both basic consciousness monsters and unconscious monsters within its range. Autonomous consciousness. The monster will develop its own thought patterns. Once a species completes its primary evolution, kills made by the monster will credit the host with kill points. Xu Yuan was momentarily stunned as he read through the long stream of information. By the time he finished, his heart was racing. This taming system is that powerful? There was no denying it. The taming system was truly amazing. To put it simply, the taming system was like a training camp. The monsters were the foot soldiers, and only by killing players could they gradually rise through the ranks. Foot soldier, squad leader, platoon leader, company commander, battalion commander, general. Each level corresponded to a different stage of consciousness evolution. The more players a monster killed, the more power it would gain, and the more advanced its consciousness would become. What's more, once a monster activated its intermediate consciousness, it could control other unconscious monsters. And every kill made by the monster or the creatures it controlled would count toward its taming points, and those points would also contribute to Xu Yuan's kill value. In other words, Xu Yuan only needed to train his monsters. Once they grew strong enough, they would kill players on their own. Even if Xu Yuan was thousands of miles away, he would still reap the benefits of their kills. It was like turning on a perpetual farming mode. He could tame a few monsters, spread them out across the land, and once his army grew large enough, he wouldn't have to worry about where his next kill points would come from. Previously, Xu Yuan had been concerned that after fattening up the players on the plains and wiping them out in one swoop, there wouldn't be enough players left to farm for kill points. But now, with the taming system in place, that concern was moot. Still, the taming system was essentially a cultivation process. Building an entire army of tamed monsters would require a lot of effort. To awaken a monster's autonomous consciousness, it would need to kill 1 million players. That meant a monster would have to survive long enough to kill 1 million players in one go. The difficulty was immense. Even Xu Yuan, with his current strength, couldn't achieve that level. Reaching such heights would require not just power, but luck. It would be a slow and gradual process. However, if Xu Yuan could eventually cultivate a few monsters with autonomous consciousness, they would essentially become his doppelgangers, capable of matching his own strength. I need to awaken as many monsters with basic consciousness as possible. The larger his army, the better his chances of success. Not every monster would be able to evolve successfully, so the more monsters he had, the greater the odds of some advancing. Of course, he had to be strategic about which monsters to choose. Creatures like creepers, which self-destruct, were out of the question. They couldn't be trained at all. But Xu Yuan was open to experimenting with other types of monsters. Once he saw their survival rates, he could then decide which monsters were best suited for cultivation. Looks like I have my work cut out for me. Taming monsters meant ensuring they killed players. Each monster needed to kill 10 players to awaken its basic consciousness. Xu Yuan suddenly regretted teaching the players the foot massage trick. Now that they knew it, the monsters would have a harder time attacking them. If only he had unlocked the system earlier, things would have been much simpler. But although the situation had become more complicated, it wasn't without solutions. Even after learning the footwork technique, players would still venture out at night. That would be Xu Yuan's opportunity to strike. With the taming system now activated, Xu Yuan had a clear plan. During the day, he would continue searching for monsters that hadn't yet scored their first kill. At night, he would send the monsters to hunt down players and awaken their basic consciousness. Who knew being a demon lord would be even harder than working a 996 job? Xu Yuan sighed, feeling a bit overwhelmed. There simply weren't enough hours in the day. His schedule was packed. After closing the taming system, he took another look at his intimidation and kill points. With his recent upgrades to control range and monster unlocks, Xu Yuan had nearly drained his intimidation points to nothing. Thanks to the Monster Tower's operation, He had now accumulated over 150,000 intimidation points and 15,000 kill points. Xu Yuan spent all his intimidation points in one go, unlocking control over spiders, endermen, and baby zombies. These were common monsters, so it made sense to unlock them first. He then used all of his kill points to upgrade his explosion and stealth skills. Explosion LV3 consumes 79% of your health to deal area damage in a 7 by 8 radius. Cooldown, 30 seconds.